So thank you very much for your kind words. We're thrilled to be here. This was an amazing experience for us, a kind of a love-hate relationship with this project, loving it because it was so complicated and so fascinating and full of riddles. And that's the reason that we also hated it at certain points. But that's passion, huh? We are UNStudio. We have offices in Amsterdam, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Frankfurt, and recently in Dubai and Melbourne. We were born in Amsterdam. We have active projects in over 45 countries, and we love to create connections. We create meaningful places that have a lasting impact. This perhaps is not the best example of a lasting impact, but yet it is a big one. So how do we do this? We love making buildings that have in-between spaces, that create this space that you never expected would be used. In the Mercedes-Benz Museum, they end up having all these activities, exhibitions, events in a space that was never designed for this. And this we find exceptionally successful in a project. We love making communities. We have huge projects, sky rises in Melbourne or in China, but still we try to find this fine grain that will create a community, that will create a neighborhood for people to inhabit. And of course, we do that with great respect to the environment. This is a project that opened actually a couple of weeks ago. This is a university building in TU Delft, and this is a positive energy building, even though it's fully glazed. We try to push the boundaries of what we can do, make bright, open spaces for people, and at the same time respect our future and our environment. So, the problem of the cities of the future. 70% of the population will live in urban areas. And urban areas are like Iași. Many of them are very historical. How do we deal with that? How do we address the problem of densification and adding new architecture to existing urban centers, to existing historical urban centers? What Ben van Berkel has been saying for over, I don't know how many years now, is that what we try to do is future-proof the future. And how do you do that in Iași? How do you do that in a historical center? Perhaps it's by trying to reinvent the past, revisit how we view the past, how we view our monuments, not just look at them, make them part of our lives. We've been trying to do that sometimes more successfully, sometimes less successfully since the beginning of the practice. This is one of the very early projects where we had to do, this is actually one of the projects that Ben actually drew himself, which is that old. This is an extension of Rijksmuseum in Twente. And more recently, we've tried to actually reinvent the three-window Amsterdam facade. This is an intervention in Hofstraat, in PC Hofstraat in Amsterdam, where we try to merge, we try to combine, reinvent this three-window facade by redesigning what that window can be. Of course, we do even more, let's say, one would say aggressive interventions. This is the Amsterdam cable car, where we try to connect the past and the future through these really elegant necessary structures that will offer a new sustainable mobility in a UNESCO heritage area, such as Amsterdam. And in places like Munich, this is a project called Van B. It's a residential project in Munich, where what we did is to try to reinvent this traditional central Munich facade typology. We try to reinvent how to use materials and respect the environment at the same time. And of course, this project addressed another issue, the issue of space and the issue of cost. Munich is one of the most costly cities to live in. For a person to buy an apartment is insanely expensive. How do we deal with that? How do we fit 55 square meters in a 39 square meter space? This is a very interesting project, which is actually being built. And we created this system with Vitra, where you can actually have a system of walls. You can actually choose what type of walls these will be. And this will give you options for your apartments. To be honest with you, when we first did it, we didn't think that the developer would go for it, and we didn't think that people would buy it, because this was optional. 80% of the people buying these apartments went for the option to select this kind of furniture idea. So, we come to this project, we come to Iași. What we tried to do here is two things: bridge time. How do we bring together the old and the new? How do we create a notion of a future architecture for a city that is so heavily charged with history? And at the same time, the site is also socially challenging. How do we bridge these two communities, this formal palace square and palace of culture, this communist axis that is right there in front of us? How do we bridge that with this small-scale, less socially active community of the Sant'Andrei area? Of course, we come to Iași, and we see that it's a very, very rich city in terms of culture, in terms of academic, in terms of business. It's very active, it's very socially active. So what do? All of our colleagues explained how we had to meet program, how we had to, these extremely complicated regulations, restrictions. So we carved up the volume, we made the maximum, let's say, envelope of the building. And then we tried to see what happens with the program. What type of program do we want to have there? We did not want to have fully residential. Of course, we needed to have it was a requirement to have a retail platform, but we wanted to maximize what we can do with the public area. So it's not just the public pathway, it's not just the public plaza, it's not just retail shops. It will become a very culturally and socially active part of the city. And of course, we had all these viewing corridor restrictions, which actually carved up the volume, which you saw in previous presentations, how that led to various massing explorations. So, this is our goal, to create a contemporary environment in a historical setting. We start by having some basic design drivers. What do we want to do? We want to add green. We want to create a green link to the city. We want to bring the Palace Square park through the building and down to Sant'Andrei neighborhood. At the same time, we want to revisit how we look at the monuments around us. We don't want to stick to the existing views. We don't want to stick to what is known, but offer kind of a pathway, a frame, like a frame-by-frame journey through the project. We want to do that with respect to people and the environment, a human-centric approach, tactile materials, earthy materials, a lot of green, a biophilic experience that would enhance the microclimate, that would make a cool, let's say, a cooler space within the hot summer, let's say. And of course, the goal is to create a new urban community. This is the place where we think people can make little offices, where creative individuals can do a pop-up practice, where you can have co-working spaces, where you can have exhibitions that relate to the Palace of Culture. We want to create a lively courtyard where you can see the past of the city, but where people are actually working towards the future of the city. Stepped approach. This was necessary, of course. The volume, the maximum volume, and the various steps that we took in order to reach our final massing. We will focus on 4 main steps from this process. First of all, we took the original massing, the maximum envelope, and we tried to squeeze it in height as much as possible. We actually managed to go almost 10 meters lower than the allowable maximum height. Of course, daylight, super important for apartments, super important for people's health and the way they feel. So We analyzed this, of course, and we made sure that all apartments have the proper daylight, even in the worst time of the year. In order to achieve that, we chopped the massing even more. And here is kind of one of the main pillars of our proposal. We wanted to split this volume even more so that we reduce the perception of its volume. So we create this horizontal layer that pulls through Palace Square. It pulls it through the building and it divides the building into 3 parts. We have this transparent horizontal layer where you can have 360 views. This layer is the layer that we want to socially activate. This is our community layer, let's say, where you can have all this flexible program, workspaces, community functions, and so on. And the other important part of the project is this courtyard. What is this courtyard? It's a green heart, but it's not enclosed, even though it looks enclosed. It's permeable. You can access Palace Square from Sant Andrei neighborhood. You can have various paths through the building. You can connect the Amazon headquarters with the mall. You can create a new pathway for people to go through. From Sant Andrei neighborhood, this is kind of how you would go through the building to access the Palace Square. And you end up here, and you continue forward, and you can take the steps. You can perhaps stop for a coffee or buy flowers. So this retail platform will be kind of made of small shops, community amenities for the people that live there or the people that live around. So I believe it's clear that context integration is kind of the driving force of our proposal. And I will pass on to Denise.
For the context integration, we, aside from the protected views that we all have to really respect and build our massing on, we wanted to take it a step ahead and to actually introduce additional framed views within our project that actually not only protects the views, but rather invites the context to inside of the projects, to create a new perspective for the city. So we use these new framed views to actually create a more permeable ground plane where the scale of our lower San Andrea neighborhood is much closer to the existing urban context, and we can actually have a flawless flow within that area. So the framing history you can see in this view is actually not only breaking the volume, but rather creating a new scenario, a new perspective to the city. To look at it when you're having your coffee, have this kind of small perspective view of the palace or any part of the city. When you turn around, you have a 360 view of every different kind of moment within the city. So it aims to create a bit of a poetic relationship, a bit of a more intimate relationship with the context. So when we move into the building and how it fits within the context, within the urban context, for us, as Stella mentioned before, pulling the green from the Palace Square towards the San Andrea neighborhood was one of the main aims. And in order to do that, we wanted to create this completely public open plaza and actually allow this upper green zone to be flowing down to the lower neighborhood. So in order to be able to actually create these continuous flow, we thought of the project as a horizontal layering. So we had the horizon level, which is the communal space, which is the space where actually it's transparent, it's almost non-existing. And then we have lower the plinth, which responds to the San Andrea neighborhood, with its scale, with its materiality, with its program. And then above we have the sky residences that are very natural flowing spaces that are almost floating in the sky. So you can see here how, it's clearly how we actually thought of the project rather than in a vertical division, a more of a horizontal kind of flows of people, flows of programs, and how they can actually be tied in with a courtyard in the middle. So the horizon is actually the heartbeat, one of the heartbeats of our project, I would say, because the idea of the horizon layer is actually the transparency of it is not only with its architectural language, but with its program, to actually be able to build creative industries, people with co-working spaces, art galleries, all kind of cultural programs to be invited there and to be a part of this transition within the public. And you can see here how actually the horizon level and the plinth level is not one large volume. Rather, it consists of small volumes, a cluster of small volumes, that these frames that we just mentioned before are actually creating these division of these volumes and the flow of people. So here you can see from the San Andreo neighborhood how actually the horizon is splitting the volumes, and the sky residences are almost floating with their natural material, their lightness, whereas the lower neighborhood is actually taking the grains of the city and responding to its immediate surroundings. So our aim was actually within this project to really take the close proximity of the neighborhood into the project, rather than kind of creating a more vertical connection, to really be able to communicate to immediate neighborhood and be allowed to influence the future developments. To be able to say, you don't have to have an entrance, but rather the city pulls you in with its retail, with its plaza, with its small kind of courtyard space. I think this is one of the clearest ways to kind of describe our project, because the aim of pulling the green from the Palace Square towards the San Andreo, and actually the transparency of the horizon level is very, very apparent in the section that we show. So the idea of these terraces and the greens actually is not only to pull it from up to below, actually to be able to take the archaeological garden, the Palace Square, and to be able to allow the site to wrap the project around and kind of distribute itself towards the context. And you can see here how the stepped approach is kind of moving in towards down. I think there's an animation. So when we start to look into these individual elements, then after the horizon, which is transparent, we go into the plinth area. And in the plinth area, what for us was very interesting is actually it really literally starts from the Palace Square, and it kind of blends in the site and the flow of people towards the smaller grain neighborhood scale. So within this area, we thought, as we just mentioned, the natural materials of using brick and a bit more solid kind of language to actually to correspond and to respond to the immediate surroundings. And where we will have small-scale shops, where we will have basically neighborhood feel, really strengthened by the architecture, by the programs as well. And almost create, rather than a large green space filled with terraces and cafes, to actually create a more intimate and small, almost like pocket spaces within the city. And this is a view of how you would kind of start to come down towards the plinth. And the idea of using the small site as a part of the volume was actually a very hard decision for us, because we didn't want to go high. So this actually pushed us to be able to create the other volume. But at the end, we also think it adds up to the neighborhood feel, because you still have the retail and you have the public spaces. You create another secondary interior street. So you can see here how we think of the courtyards as a green space that is actually pulling down, but at the same time, it almost has its small pockets where people can, enjoy, like what we see today, like we've been seeing for a couple of days in the park, that everyone has their own corner. They have their own kind of spaces. So we want to give the opportunity to people to create their own spaces within the public realm. As, of course, some requirements and everything within the planning, we also thought of the parking as being, has to be an integral part of the project, but not really taking up, as everyone else, I think all the teams have agreed. But so we wanted to have a very efficient parking structure with split levels, where we actually use more than what's required to be able to give efficiency and not to create extra problems or kind of issues within the future. And we also wanted to also give the opportunity to create storage spaces for people as well that can be transformed to different types of uses in the future, flexibility. So the Sky Residences, with its completely distinctive and different language of architecture, for us was actually to say that it's a private space, it's a private kind of a design, but at the same time, the idea of it is to be floating, to be natural, to be filled with green. The green, aside from pulling the green from the Palace Square down to San Andrew neighborhood, we wanted to lift it up vertically and to be able to create a green layer between the residents and the city. So they can actually have, I think you will see here, each residence has its own balcony spaces that are protected, and they have quite nice views towards, because most of the residences are facing outside. All the residences are facing outside, aside from some double-sided. They all have great views towards the city, and they have their own microclimate environments. And within the residential levels, we also have these smaller public zones where we kind of wanted to do a gradients of public spaces where within the residences, they also have their spaces of gathering spaces, and they can be used in many different ways. So this you can see the view of towards the palace. So comfort and sustainability are an integral part of our project, but for us also wellness and user comfort is very important. So within the heat of which we are experiencing now, Iași and everything, so we thought having the balcony spaces should not just be kind of catered to just open spaces, but rather allow for different degrees of temperature control with shading systems and cantilevers, so that we control how much, through parametric kind of analysis, we started to control how much shading we need and how we can create the maximum comfort levels at all seasons for the residents. And also adding the green to the balconies adds to this creating a microclimate. Within the program overview, without going into much detail, for us, when we got the brief, the most important thing was how much of that program maximum can we dedicate to public? Because even though we have to fill a certain amount of residences, for us it was the most important thing is how do we pull the public in? How do we make the project a beating heart of not just the residents, a beating heart of the community? So you can see here that we really try to push the idea of horizon as an extra layer within the project. Aside from using retail as an activator, we wanted the horizon to be actually something that's new, that actually has the potential to be flexible, to be interchangeable in the future, to respond to the needs of the public. And then for circularity.
I take sustainability. As we mentioned before, sustainability for everyone's project is a very big part. Again, the same section, but to summarize the topics that we wanted to address. Firstly, the first intention is to make a compact and very efficient envelope. This way you reduce energy needs. Secondly, we want to propose solutions that would reduce embodied carbon. And then we have active design solutions, where we use a combination of PVT panels and heat pumps and geothermal energy to try to at least make the building self-sustained when it comes to cooling and heating. So this is kind of the base strategy of the project. And I will only focus on a couple of things because I think we have all told you quite a bit on this topic. We propose an alternative construction system, structural system, where it's a hybrid of wood and concrete. And this is kind of the first idea, right? This is the first idea that came to us about this particular project, where just by doing a simple thing like this, you can already reduce embodied carbon by 50%. And the other important element is the green in green roofs, the green in balconies, the green in the public spaces. Apart from creating a friendly environment, it creates a microclimate, reducing the heat locally and in the vicinity. Green roofs also hold water, so 11 days per month rainfall needs to be somehow attenuated. At the same time, we need to collect the water, recycle the water, and reuse it to actually irrigate this whole complex. So this was kind of the summary of our approach, and as I said before, we really enjoyed working on this project, and this is a team that did it. Arjan is not here today, but he was here yesterday. You all met him. And this is a team made out of people that come from, each one of us, from a different country, which is very interesting of how each one of us saw a historical urban center in a completely different way. Thank you. That's it. Maybe I go back. Yeah, this is better.
Thank you very much for your well-argumented presentation, but mostly thank you for making us understand the richness of people. Because if Ben van Berkel started to not necessarily be concerned, but be responsible that an architect is proofing the future. To proof the future, you need to understand the world you live in. And maybe a multinational team has this fabulous richness of understanding space and conditions differently. And maybe this is an asset when in your company there is a beautiful optimism saying that our past, present, and future, it's all about connecting people and places to each other in a relevant, flexible, and also future-proof ways. And I think that this invites us to question and to reflect what would be the most intense architect quality or ingredient to be a future-proofer.
Understanding, comprehension,
To be open
tolerance.
to new things.
We need to, when we go to a place that is new, we have to be open to the difference, absorb it, and maybe something good will come out of that. I think understanding is very important. Yeah.
The sense of my question is maybe the reverse. What an architect should not lack to be a good future-proofer?
We should not be stubborn with our ideas of form. We should not be stubborn with our ideas of how people actually... Sometimes we have preconceived ideas of what people want, and I think we should be challenging this. We should be understanding the deeper meanings and deeper, let's say, intentions of people. Or, I don't know, maybe interpret people's needs in a way that maybe it's a test also. Maybe we're wrong because we're not, we make assumptions and we design based on those assumptions, but we have to try.
Maybe this experiment and trying, it's a territory that keeps any architectural design open. It's like a platform of findings, of hypothesis, response, and research. And from this point of view, I really appreciate in your design and proposal that there is a deeper meaning of horizon. There is a meaning that embraces the square and brings it in, and then it wraps the movement. And I think that all architectural designs need to suggest or to offer deeper meanings. And for this, I thank UNStudio.
Thank you.
Thank you.